Okay. So normal function we know, like function we can create, let's say print name, then round bracket and write them. And here we can have whatever the lines of code we can have. Correct. Now, when we have to invoke this, we invoke this like this. Correct. This is normal way, whatever we know till now. Okay. Now we can store this function to a variable also. We can store this function to a variable also. Okay. So that is again, there are two ways by which we can store a function into a variable. So where, let's say, I will say named function. It's just a topic, or we can call it as just a jargon is there. Like what is named function and what is anonymous function. So we are just checking that. So whatever we have written, this we can store into a variable like this. So what in this variable, what we have stored? Altogether function. Now, let's just remove this. Now I can execute this as well. Let's save. So still you can see same output we are getting. Now let's just try to execute this. Instead of name function, now we are trying to print name. So here we are getting print name is not defined because this whatever function we have written, this actually we have stored into a variable. So we cannot have an access to this. Okay. So this is what called as a named function. What is it? Named function. A function which is stored into a variable, but it has a name also. This name doesn't make any sense, but there is a way, so we should be aware. So this is a named function. Just like that, another way is anonymous function. So if we remove this name, okay. So if we remove this name, let me just write anonymous function. Okay. So anonymous function is like again the same thing, storing a function inside a variable, but that function won't have a name. Okay. Same output. We just print it over here and we will execute this. It's name function we have to execute. So here you can see we are getting high and anonymous function as well. So this is named function and this is anonymous function, a function which is stored inside a variable, but which doesn't have a name. Okay. So this is not like even if you in Angular on React, you won't create something like that, right? When we create arrow function, those are the type of anonymous function. Okay. But these are just the theoretical part, which you should be aware, because in interview they might ask you like what is name function. When we if we are not aware about this now, then we will get confused like what is the topic that is name function or anonymous function. So it's just the whatever we already know, that is the name we should be aware, like this is what called as a name function and this is what called as an anonymous function, like that. Okay. So this were about two. Then like uh one more thing is their pure function. So this is about name function and the anonymous function. Let's comment it. Now next is pure function. Okay. So when we talk about pure function, first we need to create an example. Then only we can understand that. So let's say function, what we can say, create unique name something. Okay. And this function will have a parameter. Let's say parameter will be name. And in this function, what we will do, first we will get the current date. So constant current date, new date. And from new date, or instead of create unique ticket number, let's say. From new date, we are trying to get the current date full year. Okay. Then we have to create a unique name, whatever the parameter we are getting, and plus we will bind the current date. So constant new str is equal to name plus, then we will add hyphen over here, then plus whatever the current year we have, that we will put it over here. Okay. Then we will return the function, whatever the new str we have created. So now just check this function. Now this function is the this function, whatever the computation we are doing inside this function, whatever the calculation, it just the, for example, we are considering just 3 lines of code, but in the actual project, we can have so many number of parameter or so many lines of code will be there. Okay. Now, this function state or whatever this function is going to calculate does not depend on any outer variable, because in this function, we are not using any outer variable. Whatever the input we received, we will do some calculation on that and we are returning that value. Okay. Because let's say we have some certain set of variable in the global state. If we change that variable, by changing the outer state is not going to change the output of this function. Means, let's say we have certain 20 numbers of variable and we are changing the values of the variable. So that variable's value is not dependent on this, because we are not using outside state inside this function. State as in we are not using any outside variable inside this function. So this function is kind of independent. Whatever the parameter we pass, it will process that and it will get return some data. Okay. Now let's try to create another function. Just same like that. Get unique ticket number. Okay. Now in this function, you can see we have in this function only we have got the current date, and from that current date, we are trying to access the full year, right? Now what I'm going to do, I'm just going to create a variable. So where current date is equal to new date. Okay. Now same line of code, I will put it over here. But instead of using this, what I will do, current date dot get full year. So now just observe the difference between these two functions. So this function is not using outside state, means because in this function, we are not using any outside variable. Okay. But in this function, we are using an outside variable, that is current date. Now this variable value can be changed from any function, because this is in the global scope, right? So this variable value can be changed from any function, right? So the logic with pure function is like, pure function doesn't depend on any outer state. Okay. So that is we called as a pure function, because in this function, we are not using any variable or any state which is outside the function. All the code will depend on the whatever the lines of code we have written in this function only, and whatever the parameter we get. But this function depends on the outer state, and this value can be changed from any other function, because this is a global function. From any function, we can change it, right? So this is not a pure function, and this is a pure function. Okay. So this is the basic understanding of pure function. A function which is not dependent on any outer state. It will return the same output with the same parameter. Means whatever the parameter we pass, it will process that and output will be same. But in case of this, let's say current date is there, but after this current date, I can add one more date. Let's say set full year, and I can pass 2 years. Now date got changed. Now this function will return the return something else, and this function will return something else, because here we have changed the variable value. We have added one more year, 2 more year to this date. Okay. I know it's kind of a tricky one. Anyone understood this? Anyone has any doubt? See, it's very simple. Consider a function. In that function, you are not using any outside variable. That is nothing but pure function in a simplest term. But when we are explaining, obviously, we have to put it in a definition way, right? So function which is not dependent on any outer state, state as in variable, because it will produce the same result with the parameter we get. Clear, everyone? Anyone has any doubt? So this is what called as a pure function. Now coming back to higher order and the first class function. So first is like first class function. So what are first class function? Again, it's just a name. You already know it. You just don't know like this is a first class function or not. So whatever we have seen above. So let print name is equal to function console dot log. Okay. So this is what this is what we call as a first class function. Okay. Again, let's say we have a function let print param is equal to function, and this function will have a parameter or, it will have a function. Another way, function, and this function we can execute. Okay. So see here what we have created a normal function, but here parameter is there and we are trying to execute the parameter. So this is like when we are calling this function now. Okay. Now just pay attention properly. I'm creating one more function show alert. Okay. And in this function, I will say simply alert hello. Okay. Now print param, or let's say what will be the right name? Execute function. Okay. Just the variable name I'm giving. Now this is nothing but a variable. In this variable, what we have done, we have stored a function. This function has a parameter. But here inside this function, we are trying to execute whatever the parameter we are getting. Okay. Now when I have to execute this function, what I can do, I can pass this function show alert as a parameter over here. Got it? So see what we have done over here. We have created a function. This function we have passed as a parameter to another function. Okay. So let's just. So see, we are getting hello. Now this show alert function we didn't call anywhere, but this function we passed as a parameter over here. So it will come over here and it will execute. So this is like we are passing a function as a parameter to another function. Okay. So these are nothing but like first class function. How do we identify the first class function? A function which can store into another variable. We can pass a function as a parameter also. Okay. These are nothing but first class function. Understood? Now we have higher order function. Now first class function is all, see, both are confusing. First class function, right? We can store a function inside another variable. We can pass a function as a parameter also. That is also first class function. Now, just a little bit difference with over here is we are trying to create a function. Let's say print val. Inside this function, we will get a parameter. Okay. Let's create another function. Show, or let's use this one only. Okay. Now this print val function will have a parameter function, and from this function we will return the function, whatever the parameter we get that we are trying to return. Okay. Now once we call this function print val, okay, this print val function is obviously returning. So obviously we need to store the data somewhere. Okay, data. Now while calling this function, I will pass this function as a parameter. So see, this is just a first class function, because this function is accepting another function as a parameter. But whatever the function we got, that we are returning. Okay. So you're over here in data. Now with data, you can execute. So see. So see, over here we have created a normal function. This function is accepting another function as a parameter. And whatever the function we received, that we are simply returning. So higher order functions are the function which can accept of another function as a parameter and which can return the function as well. That's it. Okay. So the difference between first class function is like first class function can be stored into a variable also. That is also first class function. A function which can accept another function as a parameter means this is also first class function. But just with higher order function can return another function. Okay. So let's say inside this function also, if we create another function, that also you can return. Let's say print name. And this function also we can return. Instead of parameter we have got, we can create a function also. This also we can return. Means higher order function only, how we can identify that? It can return a function also. Comparison to first class and this. So higher order function is responsible to return the function as well. Okay. So again, these are nothing but a jargons. So in interview, you might face question like this. Okay. Some interviewer has this kind of question. They might ask you like, what is first class function? Because the name is very fancy. Like what might be the first class function or what might be higher order function. So it's very simple. Just you need to remember like in higher order function, we can return a function, but remaining like we can store a function into a variable. We can pass a function as an argument to another function. Those are first class function only. Clear everyone? Anyone has any doubt? Clear everyone? Okay. Now we will comes to the callback function. Okay. So callback function is also again you in Angular we don't normally use, but in React we can use the callback function. Okay. Now, so function print num. Okay. Now this function will have a parameter. Let's say callback. Okay. Just a name parameter name I'm giving. Now when I call this function, I will create one more function. Function. Let's say print name. This will be, let's say, get sum. Okay. Now, this function get sum is having a parameter that is callback. Okay. Just a parameter name I am giving. And for this function, we are going to pass this function. And this function is going to print, let's say, console.log callback function execute. Okay. Now, when we call this function get sum, we are going to pass this function as a parameter. Okay. Again, everything will look like a same only. But let's say here, and this for this function also now we will keep one parameter. Let's say instead of printing something static, let's say result, then plus, and we will have a parameter over here also. Let's say result, and whatever the parameter we will get, we will print it. Okay. Now in this function, what we will do, let's say we will create two variable constant num1 is equal to 12, constant num2 is equal to 45. And again, we will create a variable result or addition num1 plus num2. Okay. And here we will get the result. And this function, we will call it over here with the parameter and we will pass the addition. Okay. So see, we have a normal function. In this function, we have a callback function. Okay. While calling this function, we are actually passing another function. Okay. Now in this function, some lines of code is there. After performing some lines of calculation, we are executing this function. Okay. And we are passing some value also. Now let me just add a debugger. Now and over here also. Let's just save. So see, here you can see callback. We have got function print name. Okay. Execute, execute, execute. We have got addition 57. Now, what we are trying to do, whatever the function we got, that we are executing over here. It's like invoking the function. Okay. Continue. Now it will go over here. You will get the parameter and that parameter you will print. Okay. So see, callback function is like we can pass a function to another function, and that we can execute in some number of after some number of lines. Okay. So see, we have passed a function to another function, get some this function we have executed, invoked, and we have passed another function as a parameter. And whatever the function we got, we have executed this after some line of code. So this is nothing but a callback function. A callback function is like we can pass a function to another function, and in that function, we can execute that function after performing some line of code. This is simply a callback function. Means whatever the lines of code this function has, after addition, after we have got the addition, then we are going to call this function. Okay. So this is callback function. Again, everything will look like the same. It's just like this is called this and this is called that. Okay. Understood, everyone? Okay. Now we will come to call, apply, and bind. This is mostly asked interview question. No? Above one, you might not get any of, you might get either any of the question, but call, apply, bind, everyone will normally ask when it comes to JavaScript. Okay. So again, like prototype, one of you had asked this question, right? If we can do the same thing by using this operator, we can access the value by using call, apply, bind. So what is the use of prototype then? The same thing like that. Okay. So here, what I will do, I will create an object. So student obj, and here I will store name, and I will print, let's say Chetan, city, Pune. Okay. Now I'm creating a function. Just a minute. Getting call. Okay. Yeah, sorry. So we have an object that is student object. Now we will create a function. So let print values, normal function. Now inside this function, what we are trying to do, we will try to access this value. So console.log, and here, let's say name is this dot, let's say city. Okay. Let's just print the city only first now. Now, if we execute this function directly, let's try that. So you can see name is undefined is getting printed. Okay. Now what I need to do, this object we have. Okay. Sorry, just a minute. I'm getting call. Okay. So we have created one function which is accessing the value by using this operator, this context. Okay. So we have one object. In that object only, in this object only, we have property name and city. Okay. Now what I need to do now, I need to execute this function, but I have to pass this object also. So if you see here, if we try to execute directly, this dot city will be undefined because in this variable we don't have any variable which is in this function we don't have any variable which is having the name city. So obviously it will be undefined. So what I need to do now, this function I have to pass this object so that I can access the property name provided over here. Okay. So what I can do, this is my function name. So for this function I can use dot call. Okay. And while calling, I can pass my object also. So student object, I will pass it over here. So if we save now, you can see name is Pune is coming. Let's make it city. Okay, so city is Pune is getting printed. So what we have done, while calling this function, we are passing the object also. So what it will does, from this object here, it will try to find in this object, does it have a city or not? So if the property is there, it will print that value. Okay, so let's say I will create another object, where employee obj. Here also, let's say we have a property with name. Let's say emp id. Okay. Now again, I will call this function with call method, and I will pass the employee object. So here also city is, so here you can say what in this function, what we are trying to access from this, we are trying to access the city. So in the first object, we have student object, we had the property city. So that's why it has printed Pune. But in employee object, we don't have city object. We pass the object, but this object doesn't have any property with city. So that's why it has printed undefined. But if we add the city also over here, so you can see we are able to access the particular property by using this context. Okay. So this is like call method of the function. Okay. Just like array has so many method, filter, find, shift, unshift, push, pop. Just like that, whenever we create a function also, now in that function, we have certain number of another functions which we can assign, which we can call, which we can execute along with the function. So this is a normal function. So on this function also, we are calling another function, that is call. But while calling, we are passing the object. Okay. So this is like call. Just like call, we have apply also. Okay. Now I will create another function. Let print details function. Now this function will have a parameter also. Let's say name, we will access it from the this context. Let's say name is, we will access from the this. Then we will have a parameter that will be, let's say city, or let's say state. Okay. After name, what we will do, we will try to access the state as well. State is. Okay. So see, this is same function. This function has a parameter also. By using this context, what we are trying to access, just the name. But whatever the parameter name we get, that we are printing. Now, this print detail, we will try to execute by using first call. Okay. And we have to pass the student object. So let me just comment this. So now here you can see print detail function we have called. The second function, which was with parameter, we have passed the student object. In student object, we have the name property. So it has printed Chetan. But we didn't pass the parameter, right? So now if we pass the parameter, let's say Maharashtra. So now you can see it has printed Maharashtra. Okay. This is call only. Okay. Now the actual difference between call and apply, that we are trying to see. Okay. Now is this looks fine. Okay. Now, just like this, if we pass array of let's say state on array of parameter, we will pass. So here, let's say Maharashtra is there, and let's modify this function. Second parameter will be, let's say, country also. And after this, we will try to print the country also. And this, we will pass it over here. So see, now this function has two parameters, state and the country. But in this function, we are trying to access the name from this context. But remaining two things, state and the country, we are accessing from the parameter, right? Now, the first function you can see with call. Let me just. So this will work fine. Okay, let's pass the second parameter also, India. So here you can see my name is Chetan, state is also printing, and country is also printing properly. This is working fine. But instead of passing this parameter, I have to pass an array of parameter. So this, instead of this, I will pass the parameter as an array. Okay. Instead of passing the function parameter like comma separated, I'm passing only whatever the parameters I had, I'm passing those like a array. Okay. So see over here. So here you can see my name is Chetan is there and state is Maharashtra and India. So whatever the value you send, this value it has accepted in this state only. Third value parameter country. Let me just execute, add a debugger. So see, first time state is there and country is also there. This is line number 110. It is working fine. Continue. Now second time see, in state only we have got the array because what it is considering like this is the first parameter and then we can pass second also. Let me show you. Let's pass a USA over here. So this is first time. Now second time you can see in state we have got the first parameter. First parameter was the array and second parameter what we have the USA. So in country you will get the USA. Okay. So with a call, what number of parameter you pass, it will act like it will catch that parameter in a function. Obviously, this is the normal behavior. Whenever we call a whenever we execute a function, comma separated whatever the value we pass, that values it will act accordingly, right? So first parameter, this will go over here. Second parameter, this will go over here. Now, instead of call, if I use apply over here, dot apply, and we pass the student object and this parameter. Only one parameter I will send. Let me just comment it now. So here you can see we have got state in first parameter we have got Maharashtra and over here we have got India. Still we have passed the parameter array only, right? But from this array, the first element it has assigned to this parameter and second element it has assigned to this. So this is the difference between call and apply. In call, we cannot pass the array as a parameter. We have to pass just like this, the normal way. But if we have to pass the array of if we have to pass the parameter as an array, so then we have to make use of the apply. So this is the difference between call and apply. Almost remaining things are same. This context, we can access the value by using this context. It is same. Just for call, we have to pass the parameter as comma separated. We cannot pass the parameter array, but in case of apply, you can pass it. Whatever the first element you pass, that will act as that will get caught over here, and second element you will get it over here. This is apply. Now we have the third one, that is bind. Now, whatever the two things we have did over here, that will be available in bind also. But extra behavior is that now let's try to do one thing. So this, whatever the output of this line, I am trying to store it into a variable. Let's say result equal to. So assumption is like whatever we are providing, we are storing it over here. So this is nothing but an function only, right? So we should be able to execute it just like this because we have seen over here. We can store a function into a variable where it is. We can store something into a variable then, and in this variable, if we are passing a function, we can execute it after some time, just like this. But if we follow this same structure with call and apply, it won't execute. So let's save and check. Why it is not giving the error? So here you can see it is saying result is not a function. So when you are using the call and the apply method, you cannot store that into a variable. And you obviously you cannot execute it. Okay. But if you have a scenario like you need to call a function with certain number of object and with certain number of properties, and you need to store it. And after some time, you need to execute it. Okay. So after some number of let's say some after execute after there is some event or something is there, and whatever the object you stored and whatever the parameter you pass, that whole data in this function we are trying to call with this object and with this number of parameter, we have to store it into a variable, and after some time we need to execute it. So if you have this kind of scenario, we have to use bind over here. So the name itself bind. Okay, so using bind method, what we are trying to do, bind will store the reference of this function with this object and with this parameter into this variable, and then we can execute it. So now you can see it. Wait, we are calling it anywhere or why? Print detail, no? Let's say. So now you can see state we have got. No, from where it is getting calling. What is wrong? Let's try like this. Now we have got it. So after this line, first I will showcase some alert so that we will understand, like after this line also we have some lines of code. Then we will print, then we are executing this function. So see, first we have got the hello, then this function execute. So we have got the parameter, and in this context, we have got the whole object, whatever we have passed, and we are able to access this function. So this is like bind is like if you need to call a function with particular object with particular number of parameter, and you want to store it into a variable, and then after sign line of code, you need to execute it. So if you have a scenario like this, then you have to go for the bind. So with a call and apply, you cannot store this into a variable. But with if you have to store that function call with object and the parameter, you can make use of the bind. Got it? So this is call, apply, and bind. Use cases like, see, again, like these are the things or concept which are only be useful in the JavaScript project only. Obviously, there will be use case. That's why the topic is there. But in case of Angular and React, you won't see these scenarios. In at least normal project or any very, let's say, image processing or let's say analytics kind of application are there, only you will able to find kind of scenario. But in the normal application, there are very rare scenario where you will have scenario like this where you have to use call and apply and bind. We normally don't use it. This is just only for the interview preparation. Okay, clear everyone? Call, apply, and bind. So this is mostly anyone will ask this. Okay. Madhu, notes is already there. If you go to the interview question, just select the JavaScript, and here you can see call, apply, bind example is there, and the earlier example. You can go to the function. Here, whatever we have written, that everything is over here. Self-executive function we have already explained in while we were checking the hosting and the closure. So this function will automatically execute. This function doesn't have a name. It's like once this line of code will execute, this function will also execute. Okay. So this is what I wanted to explain today. This is everything what we normally get ask in regarding function. Okay. Anyone has any question? Okay. Thank you, everyone. One more two session we will take it will like ES6 things like arrow function, normal function. What are the main differences between arrow and the normal function? Var, lat, and constant, just like that. Template literal we have already seen. The generative function is there. We will see that function currying is also there. We will see that also, like what is function currying. These are normally get asked, so we will check that also. Okay. Thank you all. Yeah, event delegation and event public is also there. I forgot that. Fine. Thanks.